Welcome back to Between Sets. I'm your host, Tim Walcott. I'm here with my co-host, Tyler Patterson, as always.
Howdy, everybody.
We have a special guest again today. We are joined by Eric Purves. He is somewhere in BC, actually. I don't even know where exactly you are, but he is joining us from out of province, and he is a massage therapist and educator. I know Eric just briefly because at the RMTAO conference in 2019, I guess. I went with Tyler and I saw Eric present at least once. I know you did a few presentations, Eric, but I went to one. I know Tyler went to one of yours, and we both were like, that guy was great, eh? Especially because we were so into the pain science stuff, and we still are. And at least with my presentation, I know that you had touched a lot on the different pain science kind of concepts and stuff that fits within the BioPsychoSocial framework of pain. So since then, I've wanted to connect with you and get you on the podcast. And, you know, we're really honored that you're willing to join us today. So welcome. Tell the audience, I guess, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Tyler and Tim. I really appreciate you guys having me here. This is quite the honor. So I'm in Victoria, BC, right in the water here on the West Coast. So I've been an RMT since 2006. I own a clinic in Victoria called Achieve Health. So it's a multidisciplinary clinic. And like everybody else in the continent, we're all shut down for the last couple of weeks and waiting to get back to work, I guess. I teach continuing education courses kind of throughout North America. I started teaching in 2016 with Pain BC, which is a kind of a government-funded organization that looks to basically provide resources and education for not just the general public, but also for healthcare providers, trying to educate all the different healthcare professions about chronic pain and kind of the research and ideas about how to treat better. So I was asked to create the course for massage therapists. So I teach about 4 of those a year in BC through them. And then I have my own continuing education company. It's called Eric Purves Massage Therapy Corporation. And I travel around and I teach courses with that, trying to spread the good word and the science of pain and BioPsychoSocial, and try to do everything I can to make our profession better at what we do.
Absolutely. And I have a million questions about how we're going to get there. So this is going to be a good one.
Good.
What got you originally interested in kind of, I guess, the human body as a whole, Eric? Like, what was your trajectory there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I played varsity soccer at the University of Victoria. And so when I was, I guess, 19 or 18, my rookie season, I had a groin strain, and we had a team physio, and in hindsight, she was actually not very good. Knowing what I know now, but she was new as well. She was like a brand new grad. And so anyway, she sent me to see a massage therapist, and I had no idea what that was. But I remember going to the office, and then the guy, I just was like, after one treatment, I was hooked. I was like, this is great. I was like, why have I not been doing this before? And so the guy seemed to really like his job. He had made his own hours. He seemed like he made good money. And it helped. And I was just like, I thought this is great. And so I kind of put that in the back of my head for a while of like, I might do that someday. And I remember also too, at the time, my mom had a small business where she did like mail preparation for like magazines and stuff. So at the time, Canada Post didn't do that kind of stuff. So basically companies, like local companies, would send her like magazines, and then she would basically get them all ready and then send them out to subscribers. And one of the ones she had was, I'm not sure, it was probably the Massage Therapist Association at the time, whatever their magazine was, which they put out like quarterly. And I remember those were always kicking around the house. I remember just reading them and being like just super excited about like looking at all the anatomy and the physiology and reading all the stories about it. And it kind of always stuck in the back of my head. And when it came down to making a decision about what the hell am I going to do for the rest of my life, that's kind of what I fell back on. Yeah.
That's awesome. What made you want to get your master's of rehabilitation science just a few years ago?
Yeah, that was because I went to the first San Diego Pain Summit, which is in February every year. And that was in 2015. And what I did is I remember the first year, Lorimer Mosley was the keynote. And I remember him saying at the end of the last day, because he did like 2 keynotes, he did one on the first day and one on the last day. And he basically said, you have this information, you have this knowledge. I compel you all to go back to your place in the world and try and make the world a better place and spread this information. And that really stuck with me. And I thought, well, I need to know more. I need to be able to understand more. I need to be able to research. I need to be able to understand the science. I need to be able to get some more credentials behind me. So then, maybe people will listen. So I think I got home in February. I think by April I had applied to the program at UBC, the rehab science program. And I started that September.
Wow.
And it was quite the journey, but I'm glad I'm done.
Nice. Yeah, I don't doubt that. Yeah. Was the pain science seminar, was that the first time, or sorry, the pain summit rather, was that the first time you were introduced to the biopsychosocial pain model? When did your interest in the biopsychosocial model come into play?
Yeah. I was already into understanding, like I was familiar with kind of the basic concepts of pain science and biopsychosocial. It started probably about 2010 was when it started, because my wife actually had a back injury and she didn't get better despite having surgery and treatments and stuff. And she ended up quite like disabled from her pain. And it was one of those things, was that as she saw all these people and they're like, there's nothing wrong with you, you're fine, we fixed you, but she's still hurt. And so things didn't add up. Things didn't make any sense. So I started kind of trying to figure out, like, what the hell do I do? Like I don't, like, why is she still hurting? Like she should be better by now. Yeah. And so what I did is actually, the first thing I found was some chatter on, I can't remember where, but somewhere on Facebook. And it was like really challenging what I thought. And I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I ended up hearing about Lorimer Moseley through some of these social media discussions. And then I found one of his YouTube videos, or a bunch of his YouTube videos. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense, like the way he described it, and it was really interesting. And so then I bought Explain Pain, and I read that in a day. And then my mind was blown.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this seems to make more sense from what I learned in school and what I thought I was supposed to know. And and then about a year later, I went to the Pain Summit. And then I went there and I was like, okay, there's 150 other people here that are asking the same questions, that are looking for answers. And I felt, okay, I'm not alone. This is something big. We're all missing. Anyway, I've never really looked back.
Nice. Which is fantastic, because it just kind of goes to show like how complicated pain is. And when you start to be in the profession for long enough, you start to question things and you're like, this should work, and why is it not working, and why is everyone so different? So I think it's important for every massage therapist, every healthcare professional that works with people, to understand how complicated pain is, which is really overwhelming at the start. Which, in my personal experience, I know I was saying it right before the podcast started, like the pendulum swung so far one way for me that I was like, I don't do anything with my hands. Like, this is horrible. So how was that transition for you when you started, or was it kind of more gradual, being that you were already interested in it for a while?
No, I think we all do it. I think it was pretty, I swung pretty hard. I basically came, like, my first reactions to it was like, everything I know is garbage and we're all useless.
That was us too.
Yeah. And then I started like trying to like tell everybody that everything they knew was wrong. And it wasn't a good way to make friends, and it wasn't a good way to interact with your clients.
Or sorry to interject, but also we've talked about this too, is like, to spread that knowledge, it's not a good way too. Like as far as communication goes, like people just aren't receptive to it. We were having a conversation with a local RMT around here. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago? We were talking to him, and he said the same thing, where it's like the communication is so key with this stuff when you're challenging people's preconceived notions that are so deep rooted already. So
yeah, I agree.
But same idea.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's because we tend to get these identities, right? We identify ourselves with like our preferred treatment modality, whatever that may be, right? Whether you're trigger points or fascia or craniosacral or something, or muscle energy or whatever it might be. We tend to have this favorite kind of idea that way of doing things. And when you encounter kind of like pain science, way of thinking, I can often come across as like what you're doing is wrong and it's useless. But I think what's really important, and once I've kind of swung back more towards the middle, what I've realized is that every single thing you do, it doesn't matter your modality, can be effective.
Yeah.
Because it's more than the modality, right? It's understanding the complexity of pain, and how do you use your intervention and interact with your client in a specific way to help them feel better. And I think that's the big thing that's really missing in a lot of our education and a lot of how people are taught is we learn these modalities to treat problems, but we don't actually understand the primary problem, which is pain.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, I've been teaching for years now, and I always ask people every class, what is pain? Can you describe what pain is? And hardly anybody can actually give me a definition or understanding. And we always kind of bring it back to say, like, don't you think though that like if we understood pain, it would make every single thing that we do make way more sense?
Yeah.
But we don't come from that point of understanding pain, and I think that's a big problem.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting with like,
it definitely does.
Well, I was going to ask you a similar question, which was like and I guess you kind of already did touch on it, but just like the journey of, that transition is something that's so interesting, I find, for anyone who's without sounding like condescending, like reached enlightenment, so, you have this new knowledge. It's like, that transition into like, okay, how do you apply it, and how do you apply it in a way that doesn't now throw out everything that you knew previously? Because like you'd already said, like so accurately, and I think Tyler and I can relate, is like you thought everything that you previously knew was garbage, and then you're like, well, I guess like no one should ever stretch for any reason ever, or whatever your thing is, and you're like, foam rolling, dumb, always. And then you're like, well, maybe there is some gray areas there. And like kind of what you alluded to is like, if you actually take the BPS framework and really understand it, now all of a sudden everything has the potential to be effective. Actually, it's actually the opposite in a way. Maybe it's not effective for the reasons people would claim or the reasons we understand it to, but now everything has the power to be effective because we understand the power of the mind and psychosocial factors.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's well said. I mean, I think that's a real key thing to do with this information is when we're talking to people is kind of including them, not excluding them. So saying, okay, you like to stretch, you like to give your patients foam rolling, you like to do whatever your favorite technique is, that's okay, because it all can fit within this framework. It's just a matter of how things are applied, and understanding that pain is a warning system. Pain is danger. So if we're doing something that further amplifies their pain, that might be too much. And so maybe you can do those things, but do it in a way that's comfortable and makes you feel safe and feel better. And I think if we communicate that way, and that's what I found in the years, is when you become softer with it and more inclusive of all the things you can do, not the stuff you can't do, you get a lot more buy-in.
Yeah. And that ultimately matters the most, or at least it's up there, right, for long-term success. It reminded me of I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, but like it reminds me of a social media thread that I think last year had gone down between two different guys you would probably know. I won't name them just because not necessarily, I don't think, but both guys I really respect and I really love the work that they do, and they're pretty active as far as social media and different pain science stuff. And one is chiro by trade, one is a physio. And the one guy was saying that it doesn't matter the modality. It's more the narrative that you supply with it that matters. And it was kind of along the lines of what we were talking about, where it's like, everything could work with what we know. It makes sense, actually, that everything could work. You have to define work now. That's a whole other conversation. And then the other fellow chimed in and had a very hard stance, which was, no, some modalities are harmful no matter the narratives that you supply with it. Do you have any thoughts on that kind of conversation?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would say for which modality would be harmful is if it's overly invasive or there's a risk of harm to it.
Right.
Like it can providing that intervention make a person feel worse. And I say, if you do any intervention, there's always that potential, but I can't think of anything that's within our scope or physios or chiro's scope that could be harmful, unless you're looking at like, high velocity upper cervical manipulations or something.
Right. And you know, to Steelman, his argument, or his kind of sentiment there, his opinion, he was saying, I think what he was saying is that the narrative is sometimes inherently harmful within the modality. Yeah, I think that's what he meant. Like, does that make sense? Yeah. Which I think he has a good point, but yeah, I think you can temper that a bit depending on the clinician, like who you are, you can change that, I think.
For sure. And I think the way I always look at it is every single intervention that we do, any manual therapist does, the mechanisms for its effect are always going to be the same, regardless of whether you're hands-on, you're dry needling, you're manipulating joints, you're stretching, whatever you're doing. The modality or the mechanism is always going to be, you're interacting through skin with someone else's nervous system, hopefully providing some type of pleasant sensory experience that allows them to feel different about their body.
Yeah.
They all do that now. And I would say that you could provide some interventions that, some of the stories behind them suck and they're just ridiculous. But not everybody's going to hear that narrative behind an intervention and think that, oh my God, like that's terrible. Like I'm falling apart. It's really an individual thing. Like some people don't care.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say most people don't care. I think the real key thing is to understand which people that matters to. And those are the ones where you really have to temper your explanation. And that just comes down to communicating with the patient.
Yeah. Or definitely. Even like, it really is contextual between the practitioner and then also the client or patient, because like I could just make up any hypothetical where it's like say with my online clients where they would ask me like, hey, you didn't prescribe me a warm-up. Should I do a warm-up? And then I kind of explain my thoughts on like, well, here's what the objective of the warm-up is. And you really only need to do this. But what if they didn't, maybe their beliefs are not that they feel like they can't work out if they don't warm up. So that's not a problem, but they do feel like they're more motivated if their warm-up is extended and they can afford to do that. It's like, well, there you go. Maybe there's, now I didn't get into the modalities of what that warm-up could be, but maybe it is foam rolling or whatever, lacrosse ball stuff or whatever things that usually get a lot of hate in this kind of pain science world.
Yeah. And I think if you look at like the world of like professional athletes, I mean, the stuff that they do is completely unevidence-based.
Yeah.
A lot of them, they're getting they're getting like thumpers put on them and they're getting beat up. And I'm a huge fan of soccer. So I remember watching on Amazon Prime, they had the thing on, they followed Manchester City for a year. I can't remember what this series was called. But anyway, and there was a whole bunch of stuff they were showing all the injury rehab stuff and these treatments these guys were getting. And it made me cringe. I was like, oh my God. But that's what they were meant to, that's what they expected. And that's what they felt they needed. And so they had that stuff done to them. Then they could go train. So you think, well, it's kind of, if you think of it from an evidence base, it's crap. But if you think of it like that's what was needed to get them to perform at like the highest level, then you can't really say it's wrong.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ty.
I was just going to say, I think the farther you go into this whole pain science thing, again, with the kind of pendulum analogy, when you come back to the middle, you start to go, yeah, as long as it doesn't hurt a person, I think it can be beneficial because, again, it's a pleasant sensory experience. And I would hazard to say that pain is an unpleasant sensory experience. So if you can give them the opposite and make it a little bit more pleasurable, that's fine. I'm just the only thing, the hill that I'll die on is that if you give someone a nocebo, I don't care what your modality is. If you make it if you convey it in a nocebo sense, I'm not going to be okay with it. Where if you don't foam roll, you're going to tear your hamstring or something. And I go, come on, you learn more now. Then I start to be like, do you can see why that's potentially harmful? And it comes down to, like you were saying before, Eric, is the communication between yourself and the patient or yourself and the athlete or client or whoever you're speaking to.
Yeah. And I agree. I think, you gotta be, that's the key is the nocebo. And if, there's all kinds of really interesting research out there that if you look at people that have persistent pain, now don't quote me, I can't remember exactly the numbers off the top of my head, but something like 80% of people, if you ask them why do you think you hurt? Why? And they will, like 80% of them will give you some type of biomechanical answer that was put there from a well-meaning healthcare provider. So somebody that's not trying to hurt them, but has put an idea in them which is unhelpful, which is stopping them from kind of progressing and like getting better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's kind of scary, I think.
It's definitely scary. I think one of the hardest things as well to do is to explain to someone, like, if you look at the literature, I don't think I've had any patient be like, that's really interesting. They're like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter, because it's not an appealing thing to them anyways. When I'm like, I'm trying to undo the nocebo that they already think they're broken. I'm like, oh man. And I know you're really about self-efficacy, Eric, which is what appeals you to Tim and I, is that we share the exact same sentiment. If someone believes that they can do it and knows that they're not broken, and if we give them the sense of the self-confidence, I think that's pretty much the best thing you do for a patient, better than any hands-on thing you could do long-term, I guess.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think because I always say is that what matters most is not what you do with the patient during your 30 to 60 or 90 minutes, however long the treatments are. It's what they do when they're not there.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So I always think it's we put our hands on them to make them feel, like you said, I love that. Give them a pleasant sensory experience to kind of make their pain feel less, if we can do that. Give them some short-term, I like to use the term massage therapy induced hypoalgesia.
Yes. Yeah.
You try to make them
sound super smart.
Yeah. We make them hurt less by touching them is the goal.
Yeah, exactly.
But then giving them permission to say, okay, if you feel better, then go do this thing, that whatever it is they want to do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Play with their kids or garden.
I was going to ask you that, like, what do you think there's a strategy, and maybe you do this, maybe is that a useful strategy to take passive modalities and things like massage and use them as a way to shoehorn active therapy into there somewhere? You know what I mean? Like, or at least that can begin the journey into something more active, and therefore improve that self-efficacy that you're after with most or all patients anyway.
Yeah, that's a good question there. I mean, my bias says yes, of course. I mean, we all need to earn a living, where we have a whole industry of people that need to earn their living by putting their hands on people predominantly. So I will often my goal with everybody is to make them feel better, make them feel more comfortable in their body with every treatment, regardless, however that may look to the individual, and depending on what they're presenting with. But the goal always is to have them not need me, right? To kind of kick them out the door. Maybe it's just a kick, gently nudge them out the door and have them try and see if they can manage on their own for as long as possible before they need to come back. And I mean, I don't do a ton of really exciting therapeutic exercise or anything with people. I just find out, I just ask them what it is they want to do, and then I give them permission to go do that. And then I might give them some tips or strategies on maybe how to do their thing a little more comfortably. Try to keep it as simple as possible.
Absolutely.
Do you find it challenging to, when you get, maybe more irritable type of patients that have been in pain longer, and they really have a deep rooted sense of like they're broken, their machine is broken, and they've already been to a lot of other practitioners, and you can tell that there's probably some mental illness there. There's definitely some psychosocial factors, and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to change a lot of beliefs, or it seems like it anyway, to like even get this person thinking positively about this situation. Like, how do you coach someone through that? Like, how do you start telling them, like, hey, have you ever considered that you could be wrong about this? Like,
yeah, those are the hardest cases, because you're playing the long game.
Yeah.
There's no way that if someone comes in and they've been hurting for 10 years and they've seen a dozen other practitioners, and they come in and you all of a sudden be like, well, let me tell you what's wrong. Everything everyone told you is garbage.
And you're like, it's all in your head. And they're like,
yeah, it doesn't matter what you say. They're going to leave thinking that you told them it was all in their head. So those ones I find are difficult. If they're successful, they can be extremely rewarding. But I think for those ones, I always like to use the analogy of like you're planting seeds and you're asking them a question. So they may come in and say that, their spine is severely degenerated and they can't play golf anymore, for example, because that rotation is going to just damage their discs like forever. Those kind of things, you think, well, okay, well, you can maybe try and plant a seed, say, well, would you like to hear more about some of the science behind that? Or let's try and give you a treatment and see if, and then we'll maybe do some things to maybe increase your rotation or your spinal flexion and see if that feels better. And if you can show them through treatment, like hands-on and movement stuff, that maybe some of those motions that they're scared of can be done with less pain, then maybe you can kind of get them into that process of kind of thinking differently. But it's not going to happen quick. Like that could be months.
Yeah.
Or years.
Yeah.
Depending.
Right.
And I always think too that the key is to never force the issue. I think a lot of people have to go on the journey, and they're going to just go through that journey in their own way. And I think it's sometimes the best thing we can do is just support them on their journey. And if they have all these negative beliefs and things, but maybe you're the person that they've attached to, so to speak, for like therapeutically, and they're not seeing as many of those other people that are doing things that or saying things that might be harmful or at least not helpful, then at least we know that we aren't fighting against those other healthcare providers as much. And maybe over time, they'll eventually start to listen to what we have to say.
Nice. Well, speaking of trying to get people to listen to what you have to say,
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to your course, how did you structure it? And have you felt like it's evolved over the past couple of years? And what should people expect when they come to see your course?
Yeah, well, thanks for giving me the plug here for my course.
You got it.
Yeah, for me, the course changes all the time. Every time I do the course, it's different. I teach it about 6 times a year or so. Right. So the course is called Clinical Applications of Pain Science. So basically, I think I first did this one about 3 years ago when I did it. So it's a 2-day course. And I kind of broke it up into kind of 4 sections to try and cover the stuff. I mean, it's never enough time, but it's enough for a weekend to kind of give people a taste of like, okay, there's more things I can learn. So what I basically do is I start by the first day, like in the morning, we basically start by establishing a less wrong understanding of pain. So basically discussing some basic pain terminology, basic mechanisms, going through some of the kind of the neurophysiology, kind of covering some of the basic peripheral, spinal, brain processes that we know are involved with the pain experience. And I kind of use this as a way to kind of get people to stop focusing on connective tissue and biomechanic focuses on everything, but looking more towards like addressing the nervous system.
Right.
And then we kind of move from that into doing like a research review where we kind of we're not going through like papers after papers, just telling everything is wrong, but we're basically going through kind of some of the basic, and we do some exercises to kind of help highlight what I'm saying. We're basically just challenging some of the unhelpful myths about what it is that we do, but basically highlighting what we can do. So right. Kind of using research to infer like, let's change our narrative, but everything we do might work. And then kind of day 2, predominantly, we look on language. So we do a bunch of exercises on changing the narrative around pain, choosing our languages and our stories a little bit better. And we also we learn how to kind of just very briefly touch on how to do a BioPsychoSocial interview, like a clinical interview, which is basically just using some very simple motivational interviewing examples and practice. And that actually usually goes pretty well. And then we kind of spend as much time as we can doing as many practical exercises as possible, really where we focus on movement modification. Basically trying to desensitize painful movements. And we kind of go through the whole body using some of the kind of very simple principles of challenging movements and trying to get people to do things in a way that hurts less. And then we kind of try and finish it all by tying it all together with some case studies. So I present some case studies to the class, and then usually in small groups, they kind of come up with an overall treatment plan, strategies, language, how they would do a manual treatment, exercise, prescription, treatment planning, try and put it all together. So sure. It's really good. I really enjoy it. And, I find it's, even though I've been doing it for a few years, I'm always amazed that people show up and spend money and spend the weekend with me. I always feel a little bit like it's so surreal, and I have a little bit of imposter syndrome still. But
that's how you know you're an expert, man. That's how you know what you're talking about.
I would never say I'm an expert, but I'm always constantly trying to learn, and that's why I keep changing it as much as I can. And as new information comes available, I just try and add it and get rid of stuff that isn't as important.
Yeah.
I would assume, sorry,
Go
Ty, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say with the, people who are coming to take your course, I'm assuming most of them kind of have self-selected. So they probably have some type of exposure to pain science before maybe. Would you say that's true? And like, if so, how many are you still getting people that are actually like pretty new, if not completely new, when they take a course and they're like, whoa, this is not what I thought. Like, and you're actually one of their first exposures to this stuff?
Yeah, I would say, when I first started doing this stuff back in 2016, there was like pretty much everybody was just like, you're speaking a different language. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, people were blown away. But what I am finding now is it's probably maybe a third to a half of people have come in with some understanding or some exposure to the kind of pain science, biopsychosocial. But usually they're like, okay, but I don't know what to do with this. What's this mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what we're trying to do is I really try and focus on taking the information and saying, what's this mean for me like, how do I apply this as a massage therapist to my practice? And try and make it as practical and as simple as possible. Like, you take the complex understanding of pain, the complexities of the interaction between therapists and client, and then how do we do that to have hopefully more predictable, better outcomes. So there is a lot of people that are still coming in and they're like, whoa, that's not what I thought, but they seem to be. I haven't had anybody walk out or throw anything at me in a few years.
Nice.
So I think that either means I'm getting less shitty at doing this, or getting or people are more have better expectations.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to give you my like knee-jerk reaction to if you came up to me 2.5 years ago, and we're like, hey, I teach a clinical application of pain science course. I'd be like, I don't want to have you tell me what pain is for 2 hours. Right. So I think the good thing about your course is that you go, no, but we're actually going to learn some things where like, how do you actually put this in your clinic? Because you take a massage therapist that is, let's say, essentially biomedical, and try to tell them that there's more to it. They're like, nah, because I'm assuming they've had success with this kind of what they think is strictly biomedical. So I think the good thing about your course would be like, no, well, let's talk about movement modifications. And are people ever surprised that you do hands-on stuff with your clients, with your patients rather?
Yeah, people always ask me like, what do you do with your clients? What do you do with them? I'm like, if you put me in a glass box with with vast majority of massage therapists, and you couldn't hear a thing, and just watch what we do, I wouldn't look much different.
Right.
I don't think like I don't do, and like, it's not like I only get people that come in with like persistent pain all the time and I'm doing like magical stuff with them. It's just, there's a lot of meat and potato stuff too that comes in with people with like, sit at a desk all day and they've got a sore back and sore neck. And I just find that it's just a matter of how I think and reason and communicate with them. And when the people, what I do find is when you do get those complex cases where people aren't getting better, so to speak, that's when I feel like, okay, I feel a little more adept at helping them than I would have, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Definitely. Yeah. I think people need to do that. I just, even learning the biomedical in school and really no biopsychosocial at all, or no psychosocial factors, it kind of put a damper on things. So I like the way the profession is going. And you said in a recent blog that you actually wrote the blog about the conference that Tim and I saw you at. Yeah. And you were talking about, actually, I have a quote because I thought it was amazing when I was reading it. You said, there are still too few who care about the direction our profession takes. Sometimes this feels like a hopeless exercise where we work so hard at creating change and still encounter pseudo-scientific nonsense everywhere you look. So first of all, I like that you go, I like the way we're actually going now because, with your bias, I'm assuming want most people to treat or pervade themselves in a way that you do yourself. Right. Course, so when I saw that conference was coming, because Tim came with me to it and he's not a massage therapist. That's how much it like stuck with him. He was like, I'm amazed that your association is putting this on. So I'm super happy the RMTAO. I'm less happy with the CMTO because they don't really put that much stuff out. But the RMTAO is pretty much every Friday they send out this weekly article, I guess, weekly updates. And at the end of it, there's an article and it's essentially always a biopsychosocial research article. It's exposing every massage therapist to that, which is fantastic. And it seems like BC is above us in that, or sorry, before us, because we even had our buddy on yesterday, and he's a kinesiologist by trade in BC, and he was saying that you guys are kind of light years above most people in the way they treat, and I was like, damn it, I got to move to BC now.
Yeah, come on out.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
But my question in there would be,
stay home with Ty.
Yeah. I'm not going to go anywhere now. But my question with that would be, what steps do you believe that are necessary in order to ensure the progression of our profession? Like, what would you want to see everyone do in order to progress us?
Yeah, I mean, so just sort of going to rewind that for a second there. I think when it comes to like BC, Ontario and stuff, I think we're lucky. Like because I've been teaching this stuff for a while, and I've traveled and taught it quite a few times outside of BC, but definitely the uptake of this material in BC it seems way surpassed everywhere else. And I think we're really lucky here. Just some of the people that have kind of jumped on this are, and the stakeholders they've just done a lot to get the information out there. I think you guys aren't far behind. I mean, that conference I think was great. The RMTO conference was great, and I was really happy to be there. And I think that it's if you guys had a larger percentage of your membership in the RMTO, I think that would make a big difference as well in terms of getting the information out.
Definitely. Yeah.
But anyway, So what do I think?
Sure.
I think the biggest thing we need to move us forward is curriculum change.
Yeah.
I think, I wrote the first blog actually I ever wrote was for my buddy Jamie Johnson's website, the mtdc.com. And I wrote that on curriculum change. And I was really surprised when I wrote it, because I just kind of was like, I'm done. I'm sick and tired of all this crap. Like that was right in my early stages of like rebelling against everything that I thought I knew. And so I wrote this blog, and it was so well received that I was like, oh, there's like people, this is really resonating with people. Because I put it in a way that I didn't get a lot of pushback from it. Like people were like, it seemed to make a lot of sense for people. So I think my first thing would be definitely curriculum change. I think we need a complete overhaul of the educational system and the competency requirements. Like the interjurisdictional competency documents are like really bad.
Yeah.
Like the information there has no scientific validity. It's outdated. I think it's obviously we had to start from somewhere, but I think that information, like we need to move towards less from this tissue-based rubbing and kneading of skin type thing and more into like, how do we treat a human? So I also think, I could talk about this for hours. A degree system would be nice. Like it'd be nice if we moved out of this, like anybody can be a massage therapist that's willing to pay.
Yeah.
And put it into like a degree system or something that even if there was more prerequisites required, for our profession, I think would weed out some of the people that maybe are just there just because it's a job. I know oftentimes the profession is marketed as like, go to school for 2 years and make $100,000, kind of thing. I don't think that really does us much favor. And I think so. I mean, in order for this to happen, I think you need all the stakeholders in the profession. So all the professional associations, the regulatory colleges, all the educational institutes need to kind of somehow collaborate together to create meaningful change. I think that's not going to happen until we have a national standard, because I think it really hurts us. Because every province is different, and only half of us are actually regulated. And so I don't really know what they do in Manitoba or Alberta, but I mean, I think there's different associations there where they have different requirements. So you can be an RMT there, but you may be completely different from BC or Ontario.
For sure.
And I think sorry, I'm going off here a bit. So
go for it, please.
The thing that I think is really, really huge too is that we need good quality evidence-informed continuing education. That's a huge bias of mine because there's not enough RMTs out there teaching good quality education. And I really think that we need educated RMTs teaching other RMTs. I know it's a huge, huge issue that most of the continuing education courses that we take as a profession are not always provided by RMTs. They're provided by physios or chiros or somebody else. And I think that doesn't really give us, like, I think we need leaders in the profession and people to kind of look up to, or people to kind of drive us forward. And we need other people more people jumping on board, teaching courses, teaching in the schools to try and get us out of this kind of weird regulated healthcare profession that we are, but into more like we are mainstream, but more into like we need RMTs with graduate degrees, doing research, teaching at universities, publishing research, and educating ourselves rather than looking outwards. I think we need to start looking more inwards and building up that capacity inside.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. We actually had the similar conversation with the RMT buddy Tim was saying earlier. And we were talking about how you essentially need your regulatory body to change. But for that to happen, it sounds like almost an impossible task, to be quite honest. Right? Like, I feel like you could change the schools easier than you could change a curriculum, because ideally it's a lot of intellectuals and academics that are in schools. That's probably why they're professors and such.
Yeah.
But to get the regulatory body to change the way they do things, they have done things for so long. Again, it sounds like a pretty impossible feat, but hopefully someday. But I think those are all good points.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think one quote I heard from somebody was, it's going to take the death of one dinosaur at a time for things to change. And so I think what happens is people are they're in the system, and they are bound by kind of like Ministry of Health, or kind of bylaws and guidelines. And I think I don't know if they don't want to change or they don't know how to change. I'm not really sure what the barriers are, but I know that other healthcare professions can do it. They can increase their scope. They can go to the Ministry of Health and ask for different changes or for different concessions. So it is possible, but I think it's, the schools will teach what the regulatory college says, and then the schools aren't going to change until the college changes, but then the college isn't going to change unless the schools change. So it's kind of like, it's a chicken or the egg, right? And I think what we're doing here in BC, or what the plan is here in BC, because I'm on the board of directors with the RMTBC as well.
Nice.
Is what we're going to look to be doing is creating a curriculum and then basically giving it to the college and saying, this is what we think should be on, this should be the new kind of guidelines and educational competencies. And then they can go through the process of doing all the healthcare legislation stuff that would be required for that to happen. And then the schools would have to adapt.
Nice. Which would be fantastic.
We'll have this same conversation in 10 years and we'll see what happened.
Oh God. It's going to take someone like you to be it's going to take someone like you to be in these regulatory bodies and go like, something's got to change. And I do agree. And I didn't want to sound like, I don't want to like ageist or something, where it's going to take the people that like are just headstrong in this idea that they've had for 30 years.
Yeah.
Then the old way has to go and new people have to come in and go, what about this? And then we are all seemingly in the same boat, because it's less and less, the conversation is easier and easier with other massage therapists or healthcare professionals when it comes to pain science now, because I feel like people are a little bit more ingrained with this stuff because they see it on social media or whatever the medium they get, or a course like yours, Eric, So I think it's fantastic. There wasn't really a question in there, but I'm just praising your answer because it's so true. And I'm so passionate about it, and it's frustrating at times. And I can imagine being part of the board, you're probably pretty frustrated, more so than I am.
Yeah. I mean, I think like for us, like, so for our association, like our board is very kind of like very forward thinking, and we're trying to be as evidence-based as possible, but it's a process, right? Because you have membership and you have to meet their needs as well. So, it's when you learn a lot about how the profession is run, it can be pretty frustrating. Sometimes you just do what you can, and you have to realize that change is, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 3 steps back, it seems. Yeah. So.
Exactly. No, it's very true. Well, let's kind of switch gear or kind of circle back. So we obviously met, well, we didn't meet, I guess, but at the conference Tim and I saw you at, you taught, the course that I saw from you was nerve flossing and its clinical applications. I'm sure that wasn't the title, but you were talking about nerve impingement or nerve flossing.
That wasn't me, actually. I didn't do the one on nerve flossing.
Huh. Which one did you do, Eric?
I did one on osteoarthritis clinical practice guidelines.
My apologies. Yeah. I did see that one, but I did see the other. I saw the nerve flossing. But my question is going to change now.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
What do you think the clinical applications?
I can answer about nerve flossing if you want.
Let's talk about it for sure. What do you think about nerve flossing?
Yeah, I think, I think nerve flossing is like anything. It's just another modality. It's just another intervention. It's another way of interacting with a human. I think, from the stuff that I know about it, I think it's not as specific as people want it to be, because you can't just move a nerve. You're moving everything else as well. You're moving joints, you're moving muscles, you're moving connective tissue, you're moving everything. So I think it's on its own, it's intervention. It can be useful. But I don't think it's anything more. I don't think you're necessarily going to always get more predictable outcomes than you would doing any other movement intervention.
Right.
Because basically you're just like lengthening and shortening a nerve along its like mobilizing it along its path and trying to make it feel less cranky. But there's lots of other things that can do that as well. And so I think it's it kind of goes back to everything can work. And if you're really good at it and you're confident at it and your patient likes it and it helps, then go ahead. But I don't think it's any better than, taking, there's so many different ways of treating people that I think they're all, they can all help. But I don't think you need to go chasing around learning all these different modalities, because it's how many different ways do you need to do the same thing?
Well, and that's
exactly.
it's a weird thing too, because like you said it pretty like nicely, but I feel like sometimes those things are just part of the whole racket of continuing education. Like, you know what I mean? Like, like now you have a stake in the game, but of course, like we agree with what you're trying to do and you agree with what you're trying to do. But like, there's a lot of things that are out there where it's like, if you just create your system with an acronym, and then you can get accredited, and then you figure, I don't know, I don't know the whole process, but it happens. And, and people love putting letters next to their names. So you have a motivated market, and then you have people who are willing to take people's money for that kind of stuff. And it just creates this weird little circle jerk of just like, this racket of just, people learning bullshit. Like,
and I say that's a big problem. And that was, it was hard for me kind of getting into the continuing education thing, because I'm not trying to sell a technique. I'm trying to give knowledge, right? But like practical knowledge that people can then take into their practice. And so I don't ever, I make a good portion of my living teaching now. And so, I'm definitely biased in that I think the content way of doing things is a good way of getting information out and getting and increasing knowledge to therapists. But it's also, it can be, like how many different levels of, I don't know, I don't want to put down any specific acronym, but choose an acronym, and how many different levels of that do you actually need to be a better therapist? And
it's just a good business model.
It's a good business model, right?
For the people selling it. Yeah,
exactly. And it's funny because when I first started doing this stuff, I was very much like, we're just going to teach one course and it's just going to be general. But then it's funny, you start getting people come to your courses and they're like, well, can you do something like more specific? Like, can we do a course on like the low back or whatever? So I've actually just started this June, if this pandemic ever stops, I'm supposed to be teaching my first course too. It's like a low back, pelvis, and hip course, which I felt kind of dirty doing it, because I was like, that kind of went against my principles.
Sure.
But I was able to kind of justify it in my head, because I thought, well, I'm not going to teach anything that is crap, that I think is crap. Like, I think there's going to be evidence behind everything we do, but we're going to take these kind of very same principles, but we're going to make it more specific to these regions of the body, because that's what people want to learn. So I'm like, okay, I can get away with that. But if I start doing a course on just the TMJ and like the sphenoid bone, slap me up the side of the head. Because I don't need that.
We'll pay for the course to come slap you. It'll be awesome, Eric.
That's right. You can come for free then.
No, but I think it's a good idea. Like, I think the justification would be there too. You're still going to talk about the biology, correct?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, tons of that. Yeah, like, so we're going through all the bio and movements and stuff, and then looking at kind of different pain conditions, like non-specific low back pain, discogenic pain, if these things, and then kind of going through, how do you determine that, and does it really matter, and what are some things that you could do as a therapist using case studies to kind of, treat them, touch them, move them, treatment plan them, but very specific for those regions. And people, I think, people like direction. They like to follow I should say they, I'm saying like I'm generalizing,
Yeah.
but lots of people like that. They're like, okay, if I see this, then these are some things I can do. So they like that rather than general principles where they're like, yeah, there's all these things, but it's so gray. I don't know what to do. And I think as you're learning this information and you're kind of learning how to treat and think in a biopsychosocial way, I think I see value in making it more simple by giving people a little more direction for certain common things until they become more comfortable and can kind of figure it out on their own on what to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah,
no, that's a good point.
I have a more specific question actually about your since you're talking about teaching, but when Tyler was talking about the presentation you did at the conference, the one that you did that I saw, I'm starting to wonder now, like, did you, compared to how you would maybe like the style of teaching that you would normally do for the course that you offer now, did you have to temper that a bit for the RMTIO conference, knowing that a lot of those people there, it's probably like, and I hope that doesn't come off offensive to the people there, but if it's just like me and Tyler, your first exposure to some of this stuff, you have no idea what you just heard and it doesn't stick at all. Like, and it goes back to your planting the seeds. Like, you have to hear it over and over and over and over again until you're actually like, oh, I get it. And then you're like, wait a minute, the first time I heard this was 5 years ago. I should have paid attention. Like,
so you were at the one I did on, it was like on like psychologically informed practice, or
I have the name of it.
Listen
to their story. Yeah. Recognizing psychological barriers and their impacts on pain and dysfunction.
Where were you when I was gonna say, where were you, Tim, when I wrote my question out? I feel like an idiot now.
That's all good.
It's all good.
Yeah,
Eric, so Eric's the forgiving kind.
Yeah, that's all right. I found that, that was a tough one because I didn't expect them to take both of them. So I'm friends with, do you guys know Monica Noy?
Yes.
In Toronto? Yeah. So I'm good friends with her, and I have actually done some teaching together over the years in Toronto. And anyway, so she was the one that turned me on to the conference and sent me this stuff. And so she's like, just, send in a couple and hopefully they'll choose one. And they actually chose both. So I wasn't expecting. So I'd already had the osteoarthritis one basically written. Like I'd done that. So I basically had to go and create kind of last minute the one on the listen to their story. So I came up with the idea, but I actually had no idea what I was going to do. Full disclaimer. So
I think you mentioned that in the presentation.
Did I? Okay.
Thinking back now, I think you did make a quick little like, it's kind of last minute, guys, just so you know. Like,
so I think it went across pretty well. The reviews I got for it were quite favorable. But I had to basically make it as like simple as possible, in terms of I didn't want to throw any huge ideas there that were going to be that were going to get people to freak out or backfire. Yeah, I didn't want any of the backfire effects. So I think that there were only 45-minute presentations, I think 45, 50 minutes. And I tried to make it just as like an introduction to basically psychological barriers. Like the whole focus for me was, these are like, to understand the psychology is part of an evidence-based practice. And as a profession, we're supposed to follow the evidence. That's all mandated in our bylaws. And I think it's even in our competency documents. And so if the evidence suggests that we need to understand the psychology, then it's important for us to at least have a basic understanding of the things that might be impacting the patient in front of us. And so that was kind of the premise I was coming from for that talk.
Yeah, just kind of exposing them to the fact that, hey, psychology does matter.
Yeah.
Because even just thinking as you're answering that, like I'm thinking back to the presentation, and I do remember, just because, and this isn't, I'm certainly not, pretty much everyone in that room probably was smarter than I was, but I may have been farther along my journey of understanding some of these BPS concepts than they were. And maybe not even most of them, maybe just some of them I was, but I do remember like listening to you talk about these things, and all I wanted you to do was go in deeper. And I remember being like, let's go into that. And then you're just grazing the top. And I get why, and you just explained why you had to do that for sure, which makes sense.
And that's the issue I've had lots of times when teaching, when you get people that are well informed and you're trying to appease to the masses. And I think if it was like, say the RMTO did a similar conference in a few years from now, knowing that there would be more, people have had more exposure to that, I think I would then like go in a deep dive in some of that information, and that would be really fun because people would probably be able to get like more out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree at the time. Like that's always the thing. There's just people that are like, just, that wasn't enough. I wanted more, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like, because I was so interested, I'm still interested in that stuff, but I was even more so at that time. It's like, I felt like a lot of people, it was one of those things where it's like, well, you're like, oh, you know what I know, let's talk about this, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it was like, I knew you were teaching the course, but I was like, oh, since he knows this stuff, I would love to see his opinions on some of these things. And I'm going through that in my head as you're teaching it. But again, obviously you had to keep it relatively superficial, and
yeah. And it's so short too. That 45 minutes when you're out there in front of a group is like so fast.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think we did questions too, right? Somewhere in there too. So I don't even know if it went the full 45, but yeah, like.
Yeah, I think you had 45 minutes and then you had 15 minutes for questions.
Oh, maybe that's what it was. Okay.
But I think the one you were at there, Jim, was, I think I went overtime. Like, I think there was only like time for like 1 or 2 questions.
Oh yeah. I think you did actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I went a bit over. So
yeah. I'm all for it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. The, switching gears here, something that's, I guess, not really related. It goes back to, you kind of touched on it earlier. You're saying how, within the BPS framework, you'd already kind of answered what cases massage therapy is useful and how you apply it, to your practice, and, maybe some hypothetical situations or real situations. But are there, cases where you would think that like massage shouldn't be? And maybe that's not a great question, but maybe do you have people that ever come to you and you're like, you don't need this, man. Like this isn't, or woman, whatever. You don't need this. Yeah. This isn't for you. This isn't the best choice for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think it depends, right? So it depends it totally depends on what they're bringing in, right? So, yeah. So if we're talking like, say, persistent cases, right, where people have been in pain, say they had a motor vehicle accident 3 years ago and they're still trying to negotiate with the insurers,
yeah, and
they're just not getting any better, and they're like, they're suffering, right, and they're in severe pain, and they're, and they've been getting massage for the last 3 years or however long it's been, and they have had but that's all they've relied on. They've relied on a very passive, lie on the table, massage them, they get a couple of days relief, and they come back, and you're just like, they're not moving forward. Those ones there are the ones where I would say, I can treat you, but I'm not going to treat you as much as you want. I think, right, maybe if we can get you to see a kinese or a PT or somebody that can monitor you on a like an exercise program, or like some type of like progression. That might be something that's more outside of my skill set.
That makes sense. Have you struggled with people coming in and saying, okay, cool, I'm going to lie down on this table and you're going to fix me, right? I've had this conversation with Tyler a lot, and it's been frustrating because, well, I mean, I guess he could explain it better, but just like, it ultimately comes back to him because he goes, am I not communicating correctly with how, what I actually do for these people? Because like, no, I'm not going to fix you, and you're not broken. First of all, this goes back to even deeper beliefs, but do you struggle with the same thing where you have people come in and say, all right, cool, I'm going to lie down, you're going to throw some oil on me and I'll be better, right?
All the time. It happens every day. People come in but they just, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about like patient beliefs and expectations, right? As a massage therapist, we're predominantly, people expect to come in, we rub them for however long they've paid for, and then we send them on their way, and they should hopefully feel better. Yeah. And there is that perception that by doing that, we're fixing whatever the problem is. And I think that happens all the time. I think, sometimes people, they need that passive care to make them feel better. So like we said earlier, so then they can go do something. And I think in those cases, I'm like, okay, well, I'm just a really big placebo for them, and that's okay. They've come in, they've gotten benefit out of it. The only time I find it's an issue is if they keep coming again and again and again, and they're not getting better.
Right.
Yeah. Because I want them to get better. Mm-hmm. But then it's then you have that conversation with them and you say, well, you're not getting better, but like, what value are you getting out of this? Like, what's your objective from treatment? And sometimes their objective might just be, this just gives me a chance to feel good in my life. And I'm hurting all the time and this just helps me hurt less, and I don't expect to be better. I just expect you to give me some relief. And then you think, okay, we're on the same page. Sure, I can do that for you.
Nice.
When they want that fix, I think is the problem.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah. I think this is very hard. I think every massage therapist, and you might have just proved the point there, Eric, is that every massage therapist struggles with that. Like, you want to be something more than I guess they expect from you. And it's hard to manage their expectations of like, yeah, I'm not an oil pusher, but I don't just do that. Let's have a conversation about what I can do for you. And I've had a few of those people where they go, listen, I don't want anything else. They're like, I hear you that it could probably work, but I don't want to. So I'm a personal trainer as well.
Yeah.
So I'll give them a little bit like, can we do a little bit structured program for like 10 minutes at the end of every massage? And most people are receptive, but some people are like, honestly, no, like I would just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, I guess go somewhere. I don't know. It's hard to, because I desperately want to help them, but some people, like you said, don't really want to be helped as much. It's a bummer when you're a massage therapist trying to help people.
Yeah, I think it's things where we come into this profession honestly, like we want to help people, we want to fix people, we want them to get better, and like we've all probably had positive experiences on our own with getting massage. And I think it's really important to sometimes just acknowledge that sometimes we can't fix them, and we can only help them so much. And it's I've gone like I've come back full circle here, and sometimes I'm just like, sure, yeah, come in, see me if you want to come once a month, and I'm I'm the person that you like, and you're still living a good life. You're not it's not like you have some type of limitations or dysfunction. This just helps you feel better. Then sure, I'll be that person. That's fine.
Nice. This actually makes me feel pretty good. I think the reason why I love the podcast so much is that you really get someone to long form talk about these things, or like, from judging book by its cover, you'd think someone that teaches a clinical applications of pain science wouldn't be that sort of massage therapist. So it's good to hear, because I think it gives a lot of massage therapists the kind of the breath of relief to go, okay, even though he knows more than me technically or possibly, he still doesn't know everything, and he still treats people the way I treat, and they feel a sense of like, I'm still doing the right thing. So as long as you're helping them person. So it's been awesome to hear you tell your experience about different clients and how you approach applying pain science, which is fantastic.
No, it's good. No, it's good to hear that. Yeah.
The only bad thing about this medium is that we can't have a beer together now.
Oh, I know. It's 1 o'clock here. It's almost time. It's time for beer. It's a pan.
I know, right? Yeah. We're 1 hour away from 5 p.m. Come on. It's quarantine rules, right? It's totally different. Yeah. But since you actually did bring that up, though, I was going to ask you, because I'm a pretty big craft beer drinker, and I was going to mention, actually, next time we have you on, we'll definitely make sure it's at an appropriate time. So
yeah, get me in in the afternoon, late afternoon, evening, and I'll happily have a beer.
Yeah, and BC is a good place for that, right? 3. Like, I don't know Victoria, or 3's good. We can have a nice long form conversation. But yeah, what is the craft beer situation like where you're at in Victoria? I know that fantastic. Last time I was in Vancouver, I might have gone to 1 brewery, maybe 2, but yeah.
Yeah, there's tons here in Victoria. Like it's all craft breweries. There's a place downtown, just kind of the outskirts of our little downtown here. That's all like craft breweries.
That's cool.
Like, so you can actually do you can stumble from the mall, down a couple of streets there. Yeah. There's great. There's pretty much every pub here will have, they make their own beers as well.
Cool.
So
more and more places are doing that, eh?
It's great. I mean, my favorite craft brew is my favorite craft beer is called Fat Tug by a brewery called Driftwood Brewery. So it's like an IPA.
Okay.
So I'm a really big fan of West Coast IPAs.
Okay.
I never used to be, but in the last couple of years, I've totally, something switched, and now that's all I want to drink. And actually picked them up. I
did that with IPAs in general in the last 2 years, actually, which is funny. I did what I did? I did the same thing I did with music, where I was like, I was that guy who was like, yeah, I listen to everything except country. And then I was like, and then I got into country. I was like, I really like a lot of country music. And then in the last couple of years, I used to be the guy who's like, yeah, I'll drink any beer as long as it's cold and not an IPA. And now I'm like, honestly, do you have an IPA? Like, everything else just doesn't have any flavor.
You guys should come down to the San Diego Pain Summit next year if you can. It's because
I'd love to.
San Diego's got tons. I think they have the most craft breweries in the US.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's tons there. There's one called we've been to the brewery there. It's great. It's called Stone Brewery.
Okay.
And they've got an IPA there called Delicious IPA. And the name doesn't lie. It's really good.
Aptly named. Love it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's lots of stuff down there. Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
And then
this is the best
IPAs,
time to be alive for that, man. Like as far as like if you're a craft beer drinker, this is the best time to be alive. Like,
oh, it's great. Yeah. I mean,
awesome.
there's tons. I mean, there's another one. Kind of the biggest of the craft breweries here is called Phillips Brewing.
Okay.
And they're really good. They got all kinds of different stuff, but they've got kind of some standards. But then the owner, like he'll go and like just create some random stuff, like one-off stuff, and it's always really good.
Yeah, that's got to be fun. That's got to be fun. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, most of them IPAs. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice, man. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll surmise. Tyler has a question for you that he always hits our guests with. So I don't know if Tyler even gave you this. So this might be.
I'll preface it first, Eric. So
on the spot.
Hope you're nervous.
The answer to the question can be quite literally whatever you want. It doesn't have to be on the topic of what we're talking about. It can literally be about anything. So here's the question: if there's one thing you want every single person on this planet to know, what would it be?
Oh,
yeah, it's loaded.
Because every person on this planet listens to us, so obviously.
Yeah. I think we'll keep this within the context of this conversation, because that's way easier answer for me. I would say that I would like everybody to understand pain, like the social and cultural understandings of pain. I think are a big problem. I think the focus on damage, the focus on being broken, the focus on pain always equals tissue damage, always equals harm. I think if we could change how society or how everybody on the planet views pain, I think we'd all be way better off.
Except for everybody selling these modalities, getting rich off it.
Yeah.
don't you care about them too, Eric? Come on.
I do care about them, but you know what? There's always lots of ways to make a living.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. That's a good answer, man.
That is a great answer. I appreciate that, Eric. That's awesome.
Cool.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
I was expecting some otherworldly, like one thing, like foam roll your left Achilles and you'll be pain free forever. I'd be like, sweet, cool.
Yeah.
Obviously not. So that's fantastic. Cool. Eric, anything else you want to kind of touch on? Anything else you're super interested in right now, or
plug any of your stuff, obviously, that you want to? I know you've talked about your course, but anything else on top of that? But
to plug for me, I have my own website. It's ericpurves.com. If anyone's watching or listening, subscribe and you'll get occasional newsletters. I'll probably be putting more of them out because I don't know when I'm getting back to work. So I'll probably be working on a few of those. People that subscribe also will get discount codes to courses that I teach. So you'll get about 10% off. I think I'm always happy to answer questions. So I'm quite active on Facebook more than any other social media things. So Eric Purves RMT is my professional page. And so I've got a bunch of Facebook lives on there. I post my blogs on there, occasional research articles, where I'm teaching, what I've been up to in terms of kind of professional stuff. So I always encourage people to visit me on there and ask questions. I'm always happy to, if people have, can you send me some papers or can you send me some resources on whatever, then I'm happy to connect and help spread the word. And
fantastic.
And the stuff that I've been really into lately is kind of stuff we've touched on, which is about basically expectations and beliefs of patients and or clients and therapists, and how that influences the treatment outcomes. But I think that's itself is a whole other podcast.
Oh yeah, we could do a whole one on just beliefs and expectations.
Yeah.
Which I'd love to have you back on at some point. So maybe we will choose kind of, I know that because we hadn't had a discussion with you before, a lot of the times with people, it will be quite general, right? stay within your wheelhouse, of course, but maybe we can actually get a little more specific,
Sure.
grab a topic and then go down the nuanced rabbit hole, you know?
Sure. I would love to. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, because I just did one earlier this week, or I don't even know what day it is.
I know. Yeah. I know.
Well,
I don't know.
Last week, I think last Thursday or Friday, I did one, and we did one on patient beliefs and expectations.
That's awesome.
Where
is that? Where did you do that?
It's on my Facebook page. So if you go to Eric Purves RMT, it's on there. I have them all linked on there.
Oh, is it the live?
Yeah, no Facebook.
Oh, okay,
live
cool.
ones.
I'll check it out. Okay.
Yeah, I think I've done. There must be 4 or 5 of them on there. I'm doing another one this week coming up on assessment.
Cool.
And anyway, yeah. So the I would love to do that conversation with you guys.
Cool.
I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Awesome. It'd be awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks again for coming on, Eric.
Thanks guys. I really appreciate the invite. That was a lot of fun.
Cool.
And we'll see
if anybody wants to contact us, you can contact us, info@motusstrength.ca. Tyler and I are on Instagram and Facebook, and everything is in the show notes below. And obviously we'll have all of Eric's stuff down there as well. And if he has a link to his course and all those things, it'll be whatever you give us, Eric.
It'll be on the website. It'll be on his website, I imagine. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's all on the website. Yeah.
Perfect.
Sure.
Cool. Thanks again, man.
We'll see you next year at the San Diego Saints. San Diego Paint Summer rather.
Yeah, you guys better come.
It. I am, man. Definitely.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go there. Start saving now, and we'll go for the
That's it.
Absolutely. All right, Eric. Thanks again so much, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Eric. Bye.